Now, to talk about another media story, we spoke last week on the show about how Donald Trump chose NBC's Meet the Press for his first post-election interview. That's now taken place. Were you surprised by his decision to do that?
A little bit, yeah. I think, look, he's largely avoided all of corporate media here in the United States. I mean, every network for the entirety of this year, he's left that to his vice presidential candidate, now VP-elect J.D. Vance. So to go out there and to do more than an hour with Kristen Welker was definitely a bold decision, but I think it really worked out well for him. He came across, it was even in NBC's own write-up of the interview, described him as calm and measured. Words you would not expect to be associated with Donald Trump at all, but especially not from NBC News. He came across very well, almost diplomatic in the way that he gave his answers, lots of nuance to them, lots of moderation. And I think it actually, really spoke to an audience that maybe was a little bit nervous about the results of this election, and maybe they don't have to be.
I think we're seeing quite a different Donald Trump already. I mean, obviously he hasn't taken up the role yet, but with this interview, with some of his foreign appearances already in Europe, it seems like we've got a bit of a different president this time.
I think so. Even just in the appointments that he's made in his cabinet. There was a lot of talk, obviously. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for example, endorsed him in August. Tulsi Gabbard endorsed him in August. These are Democrats. Tulsi's now switched sides, but, really progressive people. And there was a lot of rumblings. He's embracing what they believe in just so they can get his side and get them to on board until they get the election. Well, then he puts Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as his nominee for Health and Human Services. Then he puts Tulsi Gabbard as the head of Director of National Intelligence. These are prime, very important roles that these people can completely upend the system, upend the establishment in these places, and do so in a way that almost makes the right half of the country a little bit uneasy about what might be happening. But he is really speaking to this idea of a unity moment and a party that's completely made in his image. It's no longer really the old GOP. It's really the MAGA movement right now.
It certainly is. Look, let's talk about another remarkable case that's just wrapped up, I guess, in the US. This outcome we've seen this week where ex-Marine Daniel Penny was found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide for using a chokehold to restrain a homeless man who was making these violent threats on a New York subway in 2023, ultimately leading to his death. I spoke about it a bit at the start of the show. How do you rate how the media handled this whole case and this verdict?
Pretty poorly. I think this was a really egregious example. I think of a media that completely spun a false narrative that, if anything, the justice system here in America really won out. A jury of his peers in New York City, a very left-wing district, has found him not guilty of anything. They couldn't come to a decision on the most serious charge, and then a not guilty on this charge. This was I think, a real moment where common sense is winning out. It was clear that this is a person who was not going on that train to hurt people. He was going on there to help people in this moment by a deranged individual who was really making everyone of all races and young and old, protecting kids. I mean, it was outrageous. And most of the people, if you were watching the MSNBCs and the CNNs here in America, you were getting a very different side of what this story was about. So I think the outcome was just, but I think that most of America didn't really realize what was actually happening in the case.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch from over here. Now, look, Pete Hegseth, along with many of Trump's other cabinet nominees, they've all been victims of what I would describe as smear campaigns by the left media. Now, Hegseth posted on Twitter this week, ProPublica, a left-wing group, was planning to publish a knowingly false report that he was not accepted to West Point in 1999. Now, what happened here?
It's a mess. It's a mess. ProPublica, it purports to be this objective journalism institution, and the editor then went on this rant about, this is just what journalism is. Well, clearly they got some tip that Pete Hegseth at some point said he was accepted to West Point, but decided not to go. And they were said, that didn't actually happen. Maybe he didn't get accepted. And then, to their credit, they asked West Point, and West Point said, nope, no record here of him being ever accepted. And they were just ready to run with this story until Pete Hegseth found an acceptance letter from 25 years ago. Who even saves this stuff? And was able to stop the actual publication of the story before they could put out something false to I would say, correctly, as you say, smear him. So yeah, it was a really embarrassing moment. Thankfully, they didn't hit publish, but even just the idea of what are you doing? What are you trying to get after here? This person who was he accepted 25 years ago to this thing, and did he lie about it? Who cares? It's not relevant to the position that he's even going for. So yeah, I think it's a very bad example of journalism, but I think it's really pretty representative of the moment that we're in.
Look, there'd been a lot of talk, speculation that Hegseth wouldn't be able to last to the confirmation. But what do you think? It seems to have died down a little bit, at least from a perspective across the world. Do you think he will be able to get confirmed?
Listen, it all depends on if Trump's standing by him, and he does seem to be. So I think that the first step is will he stay as the nominee and make it to the confirmation hearings? And I think that we are past it. I think that we will see a Pete Hegseth confirmation hearing end of January, early February. Can he convince basically 4 Republicans to not vote against him or to not vote against him? And that's all it takes. You need 3. You only lose 3. I think he'll do it. It's going to be very close. And I think that the confirmation hearings in this case, more than perhaps any other, will be the most important step into whether he could actually withstand this.
Okay, will be interesting to watch. Steve Krakauer, thanks for your time.